Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. I'm just reading this article that we're about to present, and a couple of thoughts came to mind. One, how bad it could be, and secondly, how even worse it could be. There's a trial going on in Northern Ireland, and which is allowing anonymity for suspected offenders who have offended in cases of sort of sexual misconduct. This includes the R of women, or men, I suppose, the R generally, or the P's, with involving children. And so I have to use these terms early in the video, obviously. And so I'm reading the thing, and I can see what the thinking behind it was. But almost immediately, two things came to mind, which makes me think that this is a very bad idea, and that it must not actually be allowed to happen, be it in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. I think it needs to be abandoned. I think it's an incredibly dangerous policy of what they're doing with these offenders. Now we're going to go in and have a look, and I've got to, of course, be careful about the words I use because of the subject nature, but let me present this and then let me give you the argument why I think this is a very, very bad idea. Here goes. So, new anonymity law for suspected sex offenders, which would have made it illegal to call Jimmy Savile a P, comes into force in Northern Ireland. The anonymity applies from when an allegation is made or when the police investigate. Now, some people are going to say, oh, yes, but this protects people who may have been, accused illegally or accused, out of badness rather than actually being in any way guilty. And I get that. I understand that part. However, as we go through this and I explain why it's so bad, I'm hoping that you may switch your opinion to come into alignment with mine. A new anonymity law for suspected sex offenders came into force in Northern Ireland yesterday, which would have made it illegal to call Jimmy Savile a P, even though he is. But, of course, he isn't, because he was never convicted of it. We all know he is, but because he was never convicted, we can't call him that. The draconian legislation introduces a blanket ban on the identification of sex offenders, suspects, not the offenders, the suspects, until 25 years after their death, if they're not charged. It's described as an affront to open justice. Now listen to the rules. Under the law, reporters would have faced the prospect of a 6-month jail sentence just for naming Savile, the late TV presenter, as a notorious predator. The bill, which came into force yesterday, also excludes the public from R and other sex offence trials. That alone should ring alarm bells with everyone. We'll come back to it. The anonymity applies from the point when either an allegation about a suspect is made to the police, or the police step in, or take steps rather, to investigate the suspect. Northern Ireland is the first area of the UK to reduce these restrictions, but the Law Commission, which recommends legal reform to Parliament, is consulting on similar measures for England and Wales, where there would be an automatic entitlement for R victims to exclude members of the public when giving evidence. Yesterday, media groups and lawyers warned the prohibition on identifying such suspects would have a disastrous impact on prosecutions, preventing victims and witnesses from coming forward. The law, passed by the devolved Stormont Assembly in March 22, would prohibit the naming of suspects currently under police investigation, such as comedian Russell Brand. Anyone who breaks the law faces the prospect of a 6-month prison sentence and or a fine of £5,000. Dawn Alford, head of the Society of Editors, said the laws are not only an affront to open justice, but they will have a devastating effect on the reporting of SA allegations and the willingness of victims to come forward. And today's new law will not improve confidence in the criminal justice system. It will have the total opposite effect. And it will, and I'll tell you why. Belfast media lawyer Fergal McGoldrick said, the unintended consequence may be that the police can only obtain information from one complainant. That was where I went with it. Since no other victims or witnesses would have knowledge of the police investigation. And it follows the review of procedures relating to sexual offences led by retired senior judge Sir John Gillan after an R trial of two former Ulster rugby players, Paddy Jackson and Stuart Oldin, ended in their acquittal. Right, so we have this. Now, I straight away came up with two thoughts about this. I'll just leave that there, and we'll just put them there because we all know what he is. Let's leave that monster there. Now, my first two thoughts were this. Number one, imagine you have a suspect who has had a complaint laid against him, but there's not a lot of evidence. You know, there's a reasonable amount of evidence. There's enough evidence that the police will investigate, but they're not entirely sure that there's enough evidence there to sort of, you know, get a prosecution, secure a guilty verdict or something. Now, if they're not even allowed to name the individual concerned, that's an end to the matter, and that individual can walk free knowing that nobody else will come forward because nobody knows that they're being questioned. If, however, his name has got out there that, you know, police have arrested, you know, X, Y or Z for this crime and he's being questioned and investigations are ongoing, and somebody else goes, oh God, it was 20 years ago, but it was me, I remember that, and they go forward to the police, and then someone says, oh, is that two now? Someone else goes, okay, I'll go forward. And next thing you know, there could be half a dozen people coming forward, each with their story, each with this, because you've got to remember, that's how Harvey Weinstein was caught. He wasn't caught because of one woman. He was caught because of all of them. And if you make these people anonymous, you may be allowing monsters onto the streets because they're protected by the law. That's not a good thing. Now, the other thing that I came with, the other thought I had about this, is that they're saying the public are going to be excluded from these trials. Now, one of the points of justice is that justice is not only done, but justice is seen to be done. The public must have access to the courts to see that justice is done, and reporters must have the right to report the goings on and doings within a courtroom. To do otherwise means you end up with secret justice. And where does the line stop? Do you mean you don't allow juries because they're not, you know, they're members of the public? Do they get disbarred from hearing evidence? In which case are you going to have, as Scotland are trying to bring in, a judge-only trial where not only is there no jury to make the decision, so you're removing justice from the people, handling it to the establishment entirely, but you're then disbarring the public from actually being in the courtroom while this justice is being administered. And therefore, you're going to have an establishment could arrest, charge, and try and convict someone in secret with no way of the public knowing whether this trial was right, legal, whether the evidence was false, manufactured, whether it sounded, you know, plausible. It's called dictatorship. The law must be open, and the law must not ever be in the hands of the establishment. The law must always be in the hands of the people, and that is why juries are so important. Now, we're not talking about speeding fine and you go up in front of a magistrate. Nobody cares. But we are talking about serious crimes that will result in serious punishment. The law must be that juries always have to be there, and that the law must always be that the public or a representative of the public via the press must always be allowed access. To do anything else is well, it's horrendous. It's Soviet era closed court summary executions. Is that where we're going? Is that what we want? No. You name the people. If they're innocent, they're found innocent. You know? And that's it. If they don't want to be put in that position, that's an entirely different thing. But you cannot hide justice. You cannot remove justice from public scrutiny. I'll stop when I come up. Secret justice is, of course, no justice whatsoever. It is the establishment doing whatever they want without any kind of oversight. It is a dangerous precedent, and it must be, fought and rejected at every stage. That's number one. And secondly, as I say, you need to get the names out there, because there may be other people who are victims of the same person and whose testimony may secure conviction, or at the very least give them some kind of catharsis by even just telling their story. Justice hidden is not justice. Thank you very much for watching. I'll leave that one with you. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with this law or not. Do you agree with what I say? If you don't, that's fine. I don't control you. I'm only giving my view. It's my hot take, if you will. But if you agree with me, let me know in the comments. I look forward to reading them. Thank you. Till next time, goodbye.